So hello everyone, welcome to Outside the Studio. My name is Tessa, I'm your host. Welcome back if you are a current listener, and welcome if this is your first time joining us. I'm so happy you are here. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Renee Linnell. She is the author of Still on Fire. I'm going to give you a little background on Renee and then we'll dive into our conversation. So Renee is no stranger to loss. She lost her beloved father on Thanksgiving Day. She was just 15 years old. After that, more than a dozen years of conflict and estrangement, she lost her mother, who actually went missing and turned up drowned in a hotel bathtub. So by the time she was 33, Renee had joined a Buddhist cult, got brainwashed, burned almost everything she owned, and nearly lost her sanity and her life. And as a result, Renee stuffed down plenty of shame, but eventually she shook it off, made her peace with her flaws and failures, and got busy living her life to the fullest. And so, Renee, welcome to the show. How are you doing? And do you want to add anything to that introduction?
Thank you, Tessa. It's nice to be here. That's quite an introduction. That's good for now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you. I have a copy of your book, which is I've dog-eared it. If you're watching online, I'm holding it up. And if I'm using my bookmark. It's my map of the PCT because I'm going to go on a hike soon. So as I was reading through your book, I felt like such a kindred sense of spirit with you in terms of your sense of adventure. I was curious if you feel like you were always that way? Were you always so adventurous? Was it something that grew on you as you got older? Where does that sense of adventure come from?
It's an interesting question because I was always a risk taker. My father was captain of a landing craft infantry in 5 invasions in World War II. So he always had this idea that any day was a gift. And he didn't think he should have survived all those invasions. So he was a huge risk taker in business and in life. And he was my hero. So I wanted to be just like him. But I was also a really not hyper, but extra sensitive child and an introvert, an empath. And so I wanted to be alone and quiet all the time. So I was a mix between both of those.
Ah, that's so interesting. And so you've traveled a lot in your life. I mean, if you go through the book, and I highly recommend picking up the book because it's such an accessible story. It's a memoir. It's written as a memoir, and it's like we get to travel all around the world, all of these places. And so I'm wondering, where was I going with that? My question was something along the lines of when you're traveling as kind of that straddling that shyness or introvert slash adventure risk taker, how do you reconcile those two parts of yourself?
I think it's traveling alone. I did so much of my traveling alone, and then I could follow my intuition and let life lead me wherever she wanted to.
Mm.
And then the interesting thing is, I really am very outgoing one-on-one. I love meeting people. I call them divine appointments. Whoever sits next to me on the plane or is in an elevator with me or on the bus next to me or whatever. And so I'm really gregarious one-on-one. But then when I'm in my home life, I kind of just want to stay home and not interact with the world.
Yeah, I resonate with that. I feel very much the same. And I always think it's so interesting how our personalities can feel so dichotomous, but at the same time, it's like, well, this is who I am. I'm kind of an introverted extrovert. um, I would love to hear about your career as a professional dancer. That's threaded throughout the book, but I'd be curious to know how you got into dancing, and in particular, how that led you to a career in dancing.
I love dancing since as young as I can remember. I always wanted to be a ballet dancer, and I took ballet and jazz and modern dance, and I could never make it as a ballet dancer. I tried and tried, it didn't happen. And then one day, and this story is in my first memoir, The Burn Zone, but I was living in a van in Europe and I was kind of lost. And I woke up one day and I knew I wanted to move to California and be a professional Latin ballroom dancer. And so I left the van that day. The guy that I had met was out surfing. I left him a note and I said, I'm moving to California to be a professional Latin dancer. And I took the train to Madrid and I flew to LA. And within a week, I got a job at this tiny studio. And it turned out it was owned by one of the top Latin dance champions in the world. And those people just took me under their wing and taught me. And then I ended up specializing in Argentine tango, which I don't know. There's a saying that you don't find tango, tango finds you. And that's what happened to me. So then I moved to Argentina and became a tango dancer.
Wow. I have a little bit of experience with tango. My husband and I met in this tiny little town in Southern Oregon called Ashland. It's where we went to school. And he's from Mexico. And when I first met him, he and I would go salsa dancing together all the time. And as part of our school, it was called the International Student Association. We were both part of it, and we would put on a show every year. Most of the time we would do salsa. One year we decided to do tango, and it's very different. It's a very different dance. And my experience of it is, first of all, the woman or whoever is following the lead, right? In my case, I was the follower, has to walk backwards, right? You have to learn how to walk backwards. At least the limited experience I have with tango, I had to learn how to walk backwards in terms of being the follower in my steps, which is very different than any other dance I've ever tried. In terms of like the give and take, the pull and push of salsa, which is like forward, back, side, side, or however it is you're going to follow it. Do you know what I mean? So there's this different experience to me in tango. And then the other thing that I felt was very different about tango was it was almost like my hands were used as another way to follow. So my partner would lead me with his chest, and it was as if he were coming toward me, and I would feel the rhythm of his chest, and I would follow that kind of backwards. Is this making sense at all? What is your experience?
It is, yes, because I dance salsa a lot too. I love salsa. Salsa to me is much, in a way, it's more fun. It's more free flowing. There's much more space to move your body, interpret the music, the drums, and all the different rhythms with your hips and shoulders. And tango can tend to be a little more uptight because it's so improvisational. And so with salsa, there are certain steps. I mean, there's your basic step. And tango really is a hug that started walking, and the woman does mostly walk backwards. But as you get more advanced, you realize as the woman, you never know which direction you're going to go. You just know that if you took a step with your right foot, your next step's with your left. And then the leader then leads where he wants to go. But then if he's a really good leader and the woman does an adornment with her leg, he'll follow the adornment. So it's this really fascinating, intricate interplay of improvisational dance, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I love it. And you mentioned like the different kind of playful rhythms. To me, tango is very slow, sultry. I love how you describe it as a hug walking. That is what it feels like. And salsa is very sexy, racy, yeah, very fun. And for me, it felt much quicker than tango. Tango felt more of like a really slow, kind of slow burn sort of a dance. I'm curious on the thread of becoming a professional dancer before you moved to, did you say it was LA where you moved when you were?
I ended up in San Diego, well, North County, San Diego.
Okay. Had you had experience professional dancing before that?
No, but just my whole life I had been dancing and performing ballet and jazz, and through college I have a degree in psychology and dance. So I had a lot of experience on a stage.
Gotcha. I gotcha. I was going to ask you, how would one become a Number one, is it too late, as a 39-year-old to become a professional dancer? And number two, how would one pursue that path? Do you have to? I always think of things like this, the arts like this, as something you'd have to start young and have kind of that 10,000 hour mentality under your belt to do that as a career. What are your thoughts?
I don't think it's ever too late to start anything. I think anything's possible in this world, which is what Still on Fire is so about, right? Magic and miracles. And I think if your heart, for any of us, when our heart has a calling towards something, we're meant to explore it, and the entire universe will support us in that exploration. And so I would say if that's a yearning, there are so many older women that I met dancing tango down in Argentina who actually were coming back from divorce or their careers falling apart or whatever. And they took a couple tango classes and then they moved to Argentina and became obsessed with it and started a whole new life of high heels and dresses and makeup and boyfriends and all of it, you know. And I'm talking about people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s and staying up all night. And so my answer is it's absolutely not too late. And then you just start taking lessons in the classes that you're interested in and doing a lot of research online. And tango, there's so many different instructors and so many different styles of tango. I would say move to Argentina because the best, I have to say, really the best, so many of the best dancers are down there. And a lot of them do tour, but and then you just follow kind of your own intuitive calling. With this class looks interesting, this teacher looks interesting, and that's how it starts.
Yeah, so true. Well, and if I were to zoom out, I mean, we could apply that to anything we want to do in life, right? I think about what stops us from living that life in terms of taking that leap, doing the thing that really calls to you from that gut sense or that intuitive sense. Why do you think it's so difficult for people to make that change?
It's fear. And I think mass consensus tells us we can't. I mean, we're just bombarded with messaging. It's so interesting because when I did the tour for the Burn Zone, my first memoir, which was my cult survival memoir, all the interviews were like, how did you get burnt? How did you get brainwashed? I could never get brainwashed. How does that happen? And I realized after those interviews, so many of them, that we're all brainwashed because we're constantly bombarded with messaging that says we can't, or we're not pretty, or we're not attractive, or we're too old, or we're too fat, or we're too whatever. And we buy into that messaging. And so I think, you know, we just believe, oh, I'm too old, or oh, I can't, or oh, it's too hard, or oh, I can't make money, or whatever the world has constantly told us. And the truth is, it's not true. I mean, it's like anything's possible. I always think, like, in a world where Helen Keller could not only survive, but thrive, we can do anything. And so we have to override all that messaging. And that's challenging. You know, I had so many people say, oh, you'll never make it as a professional dancer. And it'll cost you tens of thousands of dollars in lessons. And I wanted to try, and I kept doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have this kind of argument with a good friend of mine often whose side of the story is, and I get the perspective, is that this idea that somebody like Kim Kardashian, not Kim Kardashian, what is the sister's name that just created that makeup line? Do you know who I'm talking about?
I wouldn't know. I don't follow anything like news or current anything.
It's okay. Well, so the sister of Kim Kardashian, one of them, I can't remember what her name is, Caitlyn or Chloe. I don't know either, because this story came from that other perspective, and I was like, okay, well, I get where you're coming from, but the idea that this person saying you can do anything you want when they're born into this relative privilege of having millions of dollars to start this, for this example, it was a makeup line. So she had all of this money behind her already. And then her message is, well, anyone can do it. I did it. And is that really the same thing? And I think I understand that perspective, but I also think, okay, if you want to start your own makeup line, this is like following along with your thread, it's figuring out where you're starting from, where you want to go, and then each roadblock, each failure, you recommit to your intention. You learn something new. You keep going. And maybe it takes you longer than it would somebody with $1 billion backing them up. But I too believe that anything that you think is possible or anything that you desire can be possible with a stick-to-itiveness the research and the action. It's not like this idea. I don't know that I necessarily believe in manifestation. Like I think something's just going to happen and then it does, like $1,000,000 falls in my lap. I think there has to be action behind it. Like you have to keep pursuing, you have to keep failing, you have to keep recommitting to this thing that you want. What do you
I
think?
agree. I agree. And I do hear what you're saying about somebody with millions or billions or a charmed life saying anything's possible. And I do understand people hearing that and saying, well, it's possible for you, it's not possible for me. But I also think so many people argue for their limitations. And when I say life is magic and anything's possible, I have so many friends who just spend half an hour then using so much of their energy arguing for why it's not possible. And I remember going to see, I wish I could remember his name, this amazing man talk who had gotten, he grew up in a really bad neighborhood and he got sucked into a drug, I think stealing a car when he was 15, actually. And he got thrown into prison, federal prison, because it was grand theft. And from inside prison with no education, he started two businesses and ended up making millions of dollars and bought his mom a house. I mean, and there's story after story like that. So it's kind of like, this is our life. I was looking at your website and that beautiful quote from Mary Oliver. What do you want? It's something like, what do you want to do with your
one wild and precious life? Yeah.
Yes. And are we
Yeah.
going to sit there and just say, I can't, I can't, I can't, or are we going to try? And if we try and we fail, we learn. I mean, I got brainwashed. I burned almost everything I owned. I destroyed my whole life. And yet I survived and I learned so much. And then I have an amazing book about it. So it's kind of like, are we just going to keep saying we can't, or are we going to go for it?
Would you tell me a little bit more about your entry into Buddhism and how that? Well, yeah, let's start there. How did you find Buddhism and what was that whole experience like?
I found it because most of my family died before I was 15, like grandparents, aunts, uncles, everybody. And then my father passed away on Thanksgiving when I was 15. And that at 15 years old, I just was like, why are we here? What is the point? I mean, why fall so in love with people and have them just die? And I was raised Catholic, and that didn't make sense to me. I mean, I remember being 5 years old and being like, the fact that we're sinners, if we believe God created us, why would he create us broken and wrong? That didn't make sense. And it was kind of like everything I was learning in school and church didn't make sense to me. And so I started searching at 15 years old, and I started reading almost every self-help book I could find, reading about different religions. As soon as I was old enough, I started traveling the world searching. And I had this incredible life from the outside looking in. I was traveling the world as a surf model and then as a dancer, and I graduated magna cum laude with a double degree. I mean, it seemed perfect. And I was so soul sick. I was so sad inside. And everyone else seemed to have it all figured out, and I just didn't. And then one day I walked into, a friend of mine kept telling me to go to this meditation class, and I was like, I'm not going to go sit with a bunch of people, on cushions, and that sounds weird. But I went a couple times and I liked it. And then I talked to the teacher one night, and she said her teacher was coming to teach a seminar. And so I went to the seminar, and the woman, and this is actually the opening of my first memoir, The Burn Zone. It opens with this scene, but the woman walked out on the stage, and I was expecting a woman in like a robe with mala beads, an old lady, and she was a young woman in an Armani suit, and she looked like she just stepped off of Wall Street. She was gorgeous. She had stiletto heels. And she said, let's meditate. And then she put on music from Matrix, one of the final fight scenes, this intense techno. And I closed my eyes and everything went white, and my whole world like just exploded into peace. And I was like, I don't know who this woman is. I don't care. This is what I've been searching for my entire life. I'm home.
Yeah. Well, and then, okay, so fast forward to becoming part of this cult and being brainwashed, and which resulted in something catastrophic, you burning everything you own. And I think you talk about in the book almost losing your life as a result of it. But what stood out to me as I was reading your latest book, Still on Fire, is that there still seems to be the thread of the teachings of Buddhism throughout. It's like, you know, this saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm wondering what you took away from that experience and how you utilize those teachings in your daily life, if you do to this day.
I took so much away from that experience. And I think the biggest thing is I destroyed everything in my life and everything about myself in order to become an enlightened saint. Excuse me. I don't even know what I thought an enlightened saint was, but I wanted to be able to be on a subway car in Manhattan and have everybody feel better just because I was there. That's what I wanted to do. And I realized after everything I went through and after being so broken and so shattered and suicidal and all of that, that me just being kind and grateful and loving is me being saint-like. Me leaving 15 minutes earlier so I'm not a jerk in traffic is me being saint-like. Me when I feel terrible and I'm in a store and I realize the person in front of me needs to be seen and heard, to forget about how badly I feel and to really shine love and attention on the person in front of me. So I realized there were thousands of opportunities every day to be saint-like. And I also realized that each one of us is unique and we're supposed to be the enlightened version of ourselves is the most unique expression of ourselves, which can be obnoxious or it can be loud or it can be, you know, whatever it is. But so for me, I do consider myself a Buddhist, and I consider my religion kindness and gratitude and surrendering into the many miracles of every day. So yes, so I and the meditation, I mean, that changed my life, being able to control my mind in that way.
What does your meditation practice look like these days?
Well, back then it was so formal. I was sitting on a meditation cushion for an hour every morning, and that was too rigid, I realized. And it brought up trauma for me when I kept trying to do that. So now, if possible, I sit in nature with my coffee and I just luxuriate over coffee and looking at nature, and I fill myself up with gratitude. And then usually when I get filled up with gratitude completely, then I close my eyes and get quiet and try to still my mind for just 10 minutes.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So there's a lot of, gosh, there's so many directions I want to go right now. I'm trying to focus on just one thing. I want to talk about the hard lessons learned, as you refer to them, as bad choices or bad breaks, or, you know, these blows, these crushing blows that you've experienced throughout your life. And a lot of them happened when you're young and early adulthood. And this idea of like coming to a happily ever after. And what are your thoughts on this idea of living happily ever after?
Well, I definitely think there's so much talk about, you know, living happily ever after, and in yoga communities, light and love and all of that. And the truth is we're human and we're in a land of dichotomy. And so we're meant to experience the opposites. And as above, so below. So as much love and light as we hold, we are going to have the exact opposite amount of darkness. And so what I learned after being so shattered is that the dark states of mind still come, the depressions still come, especially when you're a very sensitive being living in this world with so much insanity happening. I have days where I don't want to get out of bed, but I've realized that those moods are passing and that they're not going to last. And if possible, I try not to act when I'm in a really negative state of mind. Like I won't book plane tickets or send text messages if possible, because I know I'm not thinking clearly. And then I think for happiness for me, I realize is even when I'm in those horrible states of mind, or kind of like in a weird state of mind where can't stop thinking about this one thing that I think I need to bring me happy, which I know isn't true. I'll even stop and I'll say, and I call source, God, goddess, all different things depending on my mood. But sometimes I'll just say, I'm so sorry, source, that have this beautiful life and I'm so negative today. And I'm so obsessed with this one thing that I think I need. And I just can't seem to be grateful and happy today. And I'm so sorry. I don't know why I have that state of mind. But so it's kind of like underlying the sadness and the agony and the anger when I'm in those states of mind is still this thread of incredible gratitude. And then I notice that to bring myself out of it is usually to check in kind of with my inner child and say, what is it you really need? And usually it's just like, I just need to stop. I need to stop, and I need to focus on the present, and I need to maybe enjoy the hot water and soap on my hands if I'm washing dishes or whatever it is. Take 3 deep breaths. But so I do think happiness is tuning into the present, just trying to be as present as possible, because usually we'll notice if we're anxious or we're mad or we're sad, we're in our heads.
I want to, I think this is a direct quote, but correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm really curious about this point of view, literally. And so here's what I think I heard you say. It's pointless to continually try to get others to see the world from one's point of view. Is that a correct quote? And could you walk me through that idea, if so?
I think that's what I said. It's funny. I've read my own book so many times. I just had this epiphany. Okay, there's 8 billion of us on this planet, or, something close to that. Each one of us is unique. We're the only version of us there is, which means each one of us is seeing through our own unique perspective. And quantum physics is finally catching up to what saints and shamans and mystics have been saying for thousands of years, that there are billions of simultaneous realities. And so if there are 8 billion of us and we're each unique and we're each looking through our own unique perspective, then there are 8 billion different realities. And that's how you can be walking down the street and be in total bliss, say, because you just fell in love, and the person next to you can be walking down the street and be in hell because of whatever reason they're in hell. And you see it all the time. You see happy people next to miserable people. And so I just realized, like, we try so hard to get people to see from our point of view, and they just can't. I mean, they can't. And especially when you add in different levels of evolution of a soul, it's kind of like somebody standing on the top of a 40-foot building trying to explain a view to somebody who's in a basement. And the person in the basement is not going to see the same view as the person on the 40th floor until that person slowly evolves and continues going up the elevator or the stairs. And there's a beautiful quote, and I hate that I forget who said this, but it's for those who understand, no explanation is necessary. And for those who don't understand, no explanation is possible. And so I just learned it's better to use our energy to live our own brightest, most thriving life. And if people want to ask, how are you so happy? How's your life so abundant? Then they're receptive and ready to hear. And you can tell them.
The quote, I actually have it in front of me serendipitously.
I'm so glad. Thank you. I hate quoting people and not giving them credit.
Oh, I do too. And I always, with things like that, will add it into the show notes.
Okay.
But I'm not going to say this name right, but I'll try. Ziad K Abdrlnour. Ziad K Abdrlnour. Noir. Yeah, that's kind of a mouthful for me, but it is a beautiful quote. For those who understand, no explanation is needed. For those who do not understand, no explanation is possible. So I get what you're saying, and I guess where I go with that is, how do we bridge the gap when there's so much misunderstanding or polarity, and create connection when there are so many different experiences and perspectives? How do we create community? How do we create relationship if we're, you know what I mean? I mean,
I do.
I just
I
wonder.
do. And my answer to that is, we can tell when somebody is receptive. So say you sit down across the table from somebody who has a completely different ideas, COVID or politics or whatever it is. Say you're on one side of the equation, belief system, and this person you're sitting with is on the other. You can tell immediately if that person's receptive to actually hearing your point of view. I mean, they'll say, I'm fascinated to know why you believe that, because I believe this, but will you please tell me? And in that situation, the person's open, you can offer your point of view with love and kindness. I think when you sit across from somebody who is like, you're totally wrong, it's this way, it's only this way, then what I do is I just listen. I just open my heart and I listen and I try my hardest to see where they're coming from, knowing that they're not going to hear where I'm coming from. And then at the end of the conversation, I just try to offer kindness.
It's almost like a meditation, approaching it with the may you be happy, may you be well, may you be free, whatever it is that whatever phrase you want to use for meditation. That's what makes me think of. I want to switch gears a little bit to this idea that well, I don't want to say we attract people who treat us badly, but I think that there's a lot of us experience this in terms of, I think that I see this most often in my own life and in relationship others that are close to me, that they seem to attract the same kind of personality over and over again. Whether that be because of patterns from the past or childhood, or that's the type of person we think we're attracted to. What do you think that's all about, and how do we move beyond it?
I definitely think we attract in romantic partners that mimic the love pattern we learned as children. And so, unfortunately, so many of us were raised by parents who were overstressed, overworked, not able to kind of work on their own self actualization. And so they loved us and gave us attention when they were able, but then they ignored us or abused us when they were struggling. And so then so many of us are attracted to similar love patterns from in adult relationships. And I learned for me, it's a self-love journey. And so the more we love ourselves, the less we're willing to let other people treat us badly. And so when I was younger, I just blamed all my failed relationships on it being the wrong guy. Oh, it's the wrong guy. Oh, it's the wrong guy when I find the right guy. And then when I was 33, I met this amazing guy, and it was still the same kind of pattern where I was being critical in my head towards him, and he wasn't the right guy. And I finally saw at that age, after being through enough relationships, okay, it's not the guy, it's me. And the need to criticize and the need to find fault is a need to criticize and find fault in myself. And it's one of the reasons I joined the cult, because I thought there's something broken in me that I need to fix in order to have a really good romantic relationship. And so then as I went up the kind of the mountain of self-love, each relationship got better and better. And then I would learn from them. And so I think the way we improve our relationships is that we learn from each one. And then we, instead of just blaming the other person, we do the work. And even if we're in an abusive relationship, to say, well, why did I choose that? Why I picked that person as a weapon to beat myself up with. So it's so easy to go, oh, he was just terrible. But it makes more sense to go, well, he was obviously terrible. I mean, all the signs were there and I stayed. So why did I stay?
Do you think it takes a certain amount of time in between relationships to allow those lessons to catch up with us? I think about people that kind of hop from one relationship to another, choosing the same person, the same characteristic. Do you think it'd be different if we gave ourselves time in between, to be single, to not date, to to introspect?
Definitely. I think we absolutely have to. I think if we really, really want true love and true connection, we owe it to ourselves, because we have to assimilate all that we learned. And then we have to really do the hard work of looking at where we made mistakes, where we had walls up preventing intimacy, where we got into power struggles, whatever we did. And we have to go through the heartbreak when we love. It takes a while, I think. I know for me, I always have really long periods after breakups because I love really intensely, even when I pick the wrong people. And so it takes a long time for my heart to heal. And I don't think we should jump right into another relationship. I mean, it's kind of just an addiction in a way, soothing, not wanting to feel the feelings, not wanting to be alone, not wanting to sit with the hard emotions and just jumping into the next distraction.
Yeah. Why do you think it's so hard for us to be alone? I mean, I get that. I feel the same way. And myself, a serial monogamist, I've gone from one relationship to another since I was 14. And I mean, I've taken time in between, but this might be a matter of months. So when you say a long period of time, what does that mean for you?
Well, I've gone 8 years in between. I mean, when I was healing from the cult and all of that. But usually for me, it's 6 months to a year. And most of my relationships are short because I guess because I never chose somebody who was a true possibility of a true partner, of a true divine match. I wasn't ready. I think I was so upset about losing my father when I was 15 that a part of me was terrified to find somebody who was a true match and lose him. Um, I think so many of us are afraid to be alone and afraid to be without constant distraction because we're afraid to feel all the feelings we haven't processed. And I think our society puts us into fight or flight mode from the time we're children. You're running from, school to activities to whatever. We're being schools, how long? It's so long. And then you have after school activities and you have assignments. And so I don't think we learn to be able to just sit with nothing to do. And if we do sit with nothing to do, then all the feelings that we've repressed and suppressed since we were kids start to come up, and that's really uncomfortable. But I've seen people who refuse to let those feelings ever come up, and they manifest disease, either physical disease or mental disease, mental illness. And so I just feel when I look at friends of mine that are like that, and even an ex-boyfriend who is like that, I feel like, my gosh, if you would just take 1 year, 6 months, and just face head on all those feelings that you've been repressing, your whole life would open up. It can't be that terrible.
Yeah. But at the same time, it feels almost paralyzing. It's that scary. It's interesting. I often find that when I do the thing that I think was terrifying or so scary it would break me, and I just do it, it's never as bad as my mind thinks it was, or it's as bad as I made it out, but I survived. And I
Right.
and I came out on the other end of it with a whole new level of self confidence and self understanding. It's so easy to say that, though, and it's so hard to make yourself do it.
It
Uh,
is.
unless
And
you
I
think
think,
it gets easier. Do you think it gets easier?
well, I do. And I think with age, you start to realize, like, I don't want to live with constant anxiety or constant dread, or, the anxiety comes from that shadow looming over you that says, oh my gosh, if this person breaks up with me, I'm going to be alone. Or, oh my gosh, if I lose this job, I'm not going to be able to support myself. And I think with age, you eventually go, okay, what am I so afraid of? And I'm going to sit here and face it because I'm tired of living 30 years with this anxiety or this dread or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And I have to say, David Hawkins has a great book called Letting Go, The Pathway to Surrender. And he really addresses how to face those emotions. I found it incredibly healing.
I'm writing that down. Letting go, the pathway to
Surrender.
surrender. David
Hawkins.
Hawkins. Thank you.
Yeah. And he talks in the first, I think, of the first 20 pages, he talks the reader through how to do it.
Wonderful. I need that in my life. I want to switch gears a little bit to another central theme of the book, which is magic, miracles, divine intervention. You said, when you're traveling somewhere on the plane, wherever it is you're going, there's divine appointments. I love that. So I think this is a concept that I want to believe in, and I've experienced it, but I still there's this mental construct that I can't get over where it's a little bit, oh, that can't be real. Oh, I'll rationalize it in some way, right? So my question is, how can we open ourselves up to this belief and really let the divine in, really let magic and miracles into our lives?
It's interesting that you say that because so many people have said that to me and asked the same question on the interviews I've been doing. And there is such a tendency to explain away magic and miracles, like, oh, it's just a coincidence, or um, and and I think the number one way to pay attention to magic, I just heard recently that magic it only dances in the present. And so we have to be present to witness it. We have to slow down. We have to, take a half an hour a day, maybe, to just sit in quiet or in nature, or um, put the cell phone down and open our eyes and our ears and our senses. And the more we pay attention to the magical, the more we notice it. It's kind of like a muscle of awareness that we have to build. But you'll notice, for example, you're upset about something and you turn on the radio and the lyrics that come on are exactly what you needed to hear. Or just these little things. Like one day I was thinking, oh my gosh, I keep forgetting to buy Post-it notes. I have to buy Post-it notes, and I'm so annoyed that I keep forgetting. And then I opened my mail and some realtor had sent me Post-it notes with her logo, but little things like that. And most people wouldn't notice that, but I was like, I needed Post-it notes. The universe delivered them to my mailbox. And so the more we pay attention and acknowledge, the more we're blessed with it.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have any, there's a story in your book I was reading last night about seeing a doctor, and he was evaluating you for, I think it was a hip injury.
Yeah.
And would you mind sharing that story with us if you recall what I'm referring
Oh,
to?
sure. So I was this professional dancer, and I woke up one day and my hip wasn't working, and it felt like a sliding glass door that had fallen off the track. And no matter what doctor I went to, everybody said I would never dance again and I would probably never walk without pain. And meanwhile, my mother had had a stroke, and she had been recovering from it. She was doing so much better. But I was living in California. She was in Florida. And I finally gave up going to doctors. I had one more appointment with a doctor, but he was famous and it was like 2 months out or something. And so I decided I can't dance. I might as well move home to Florida and be with my mother and help take care of her, which I did. And she ended up going missing and dying. And the day that I found out she died was the day that I had this appointment with this doctor. And I had to keep it. And so I went, and I was late, and he was mean, and I didn't explain why I was late. And then he scanned my body. He asked me to show up in flip-flops and little shorts and a tank top. He didn't ask anything about my injury, anything about my past, anything about my life. And he scanned my body and he said, you broke your fibula years ago, and it's been throwing off your balance ever since, and no wonder your hip went out. And I had broken my fibula. I fractured it, and I kept dancing on it because I didn't want to lose my roles in the dance performances until it broke. And then he said, I could operate and I could charge you a lot of money, but I want to try this instead. And he had me lie down on his table, and he said, I want you to picture the injury, and I want you to tell me what color it is. And I was really surprised to hear that, but I had been to a dermatologist years before for cysts in my wrists. Well, I asked him about cysts in my wrists, and he said that I could have my body dissolve them. He said I could operate, but your body will reform them. So why don't you ask your body to dissolve them? He was the first person that told me that type of healing. Mm-hmm. And I did dissolve the cysts, and I realized I shouldn't be a massage therapist. This was back when I was living in Hawaii. So I closed my eyes and I kind of put my mind on my hip, and the energy was really dark and black and like tar. And I told him that, and then he said, do you know why you have this injury? And I just started to cry. And I said, yes, I do. I knew that I had the injury so I would move home to be with my mother before she passed away. And, or I would like to say before she made her transition to non-physical energy. And so I started to cry, and he said, do you feel like sharing why you have the injury? And I told him, and he said, is that why you were late? Or he said, do you still need the injury? And I said, no, she just died today, or I just found out. And he said, is that why you were late? And I said, yes. And he was much nicer. And then he said, so I'd like you to thank the injury for doing what it came to do, and I'd like you to let it go. And so I did that. And then he said, and what color do you see there now? And I saw all that stuck black energy disappear, and I saw it be replaced with turquoise and gold light. And the light got brighter and brighter and brighter. And I thanked the injury from the bottom of my heart. I mean, if that hadn't happened, I would never have spent the last few months with my mother. And so um, he said, "You're healed now." And when people ask you, when they ask you, how, how your hip is, you say you're fine. And over time, it just got better and better. And then I was completely healed.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing. This brings me to my next question, and probably one of the final questions, which is the idea of turning pain to purpose. I think basically, to sum up that experience, is like there is a purpose behind that pain, whether it's physical or psychological. I feel like there's a step that a lot of us maybe are missing. I'm not sure what the right word is for this, but it feels like I can raise it, I can listen to you say that, but I immediately go to, okay, well, how are you able to do that? How are you able to tap into the color? How were you able to just let it go and know what that pain was for? Was there something in particular you feel you had to realize in order to accomplish that mindset?
I don't think, I think I tend to be really spiritually oriented. I always have been. So I really do believe in divine guidance, and that we are beings of light having a human experience, and that it's not supposed to be so hard for us. And that our souls are always guiding us to what's in our highest good. So I always had that mindset anyway. So it really just took people kind of planting these seeds of possibility in I guess my mind was really fertile for these magic and miracle based theories.
Mm-hmm.
I would say to people who tend to be more resistant, it's like, okay, well, you've done life your way, and how has it worked? And what if you tried, say, for 1 month or even 1 week or even 2 days? I'm going to open my mind to magic and miracles and divine choreography and, say, divine appointments with the people that cross my path or whatever. It's funny because I have a twin brother, and he was always like, well, you just believe in everything's magic and miracles, and one day you're going to walk out into a street. He goes, you live in a bubble, and you're going to walk out in the street and get hit by a bus. And I was like, but you know what? If that happened, I would be in such a blissful place. It's like, why not try to believe it and see what happens? Just experiment. I mean, that's what mysticism is. It's not taking someone else's word for it. It's actually figuring it out, trying it out for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Okay, now the challenge is to decide 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 days. How long am I going to experiment with this and hopefully help it stick? So final question is, this is your second book. First one being The Burn Zone, second one being Still on Fire. What are you looking forward to next? What are you working on these days? What are you excited about?
Well, the publicity campaign for this book, because this book comes out next Tuesday, August 16th. And I have great publicists. So I'm doing a ton of interviews and traveling a bit for book signings. That will take me all the way through October. And then I'm spending November in Buenos Aires, which is one of my favorite places to write. And I'm working on the third book in this trilogy, and it's called Twin Flames.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay, I lied. I have one more question. You said your favorite place to write is in Buenos Aires. Do you have, I'm always so curious about how writers approach their writing, whether it's a novel or it's a memoir. Do you have like a daily schedule? Do you just sequester yourself for 2 weeks at a time? How do you approach your writing?
I'm fortunate in that I don't have a lot of deadlines. I can let this happen when I'm divinely inspired. And I've noticed that if I really follow the flows of inspiration in my life, I'll have periods of time where all I want to do is shut off my phone and hermit out from the world and just write and work on writing. And then And anybody who wants me to go do something fun, I don't want to. I just want to stay home and write, or I want to go, for example, in Argentina, I'll go sit in a cafe all day long and write. Um, and then I'll have big chunks of time in my life where I just can't even stand the idea of writing. And anything I try to write is crap. And so I've learned to just follow when the divine flow is there, and not force it when it's not. But if I do have a deadline, like with this publicity tour, I have lots of guest writing. I sit down and I start writing, and I know it's going to be crap, and then I wait until the flow takes over, and it always does.
That's cool. All right, Renee, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. Is there any last thing that you want to share before we say goodbye?
I guess I just would want to share, this is kind of the opening of Still on Fire, and we touched on this, that there are 8 billion of us on this planet, and each one of us is unique. And I just wish each one of us would be more true to ourselves. If we're in a larger body, relish being in a larger body. If we don't have, great financial resources, kind of sit with that and just feel into, well, what other resources do I have? I have a huge family, or I have great health, or, instead of wanting so badly to not have the life we have and the body we have, I just wish each one of us would just kind of love ourselves exactly as we are. And then from there, launch into a more and more authentic version.
Yeah, amen. What a beautiful practice. Renee, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. It's been a blessing to speak with you today.
Thank you, Tessa. I loved meeting you and talking to you.
Well, everyone, that concludes another amazing episode of Outside the Studio. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something new, maybe remembered something old, maybe felt inspired to apply something to your life. You can hear my dog in the background. She's doing a little happy dance. So Daisy enjoyed it. Anyhow, I wanted to just pop in here to wrap us up to say a couple of things. Number one, I have such an amazing team that helps me put these podcasts together. Without them, I wouldn't be able to bring these amazing conversations to you. So thank you to my producer, my director of creative services, my sound editor, my engineer, Consistency Media. Don't know what I would do without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the amazing creation and artistic musical genius, Drew Lovern. Thank you so much for putting together this music specifically for Outside the Studio. So unique to the show, only place you're ever going to hear it is right here. Thanks, you guys. You make my world go round. Stay well, everyone. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, share on the socials, especially if it's a show that you think, hey, this could help somebody else. That's what this is all about, right? We're sharing information so that we're better, so that we're inspired, so that we're lifting each other up, and we're learning how to be in this world, living on this planet to the best of our ability, sharing information and inspiring one another. And that's my hope. That's my hope for the show. Take care.